For decades, the world accepted a simple explanation for why Cher walked away from her marriage. It was said that fame changed everything. That success pulled two people in different directions until love could no longer survive. It sounded believable, almost predictable. But over time, that version began to feel incomplete. Because behind the headlines and public appearances, there was a more complicated story, one shaped not just by success, but by control, imbalance, and the quiet struggle to hold on to a sense of self. Cher's story didn't begin with glamour or opportunity. It began in instability. Born Cherilyn Sarkisian, she grew up in an environment where consistency was rare. Financial hardship, shifting family dynamics, and emotional uncertainty defined her early years. When a child grows up like that, they learn quickly how to adapt. They learn to read situations, to adjust, and to survive. But they also grow up searching for something steady, something that feels like safety. By the time she met Sonny Bono in the early 1960s, Cher was still incredibly young. He was older, experienced, and already connected within the music industry. Their meeting wasn't dramatic or romantic in the way people later imagined. It was gradual, almost practical. He made her laugh. He gave her a place to stay when she needed one. And more than anything, he offered stability, something she had rarely experienced before. At first, their relationship seemed to work because it filled gaps in both their lives. Sonny had direction and ambition, while Cher had raw talent and presence. He introduced her to the music world from behind the scenes, where she began as a background singer. Slowly, he encouraged her to step forward to be seen and eventually to perform beside him. What started as guidance turned into partnership, or at least, that's how it appeared. As their music gained attention, so did their image. Together, they created something that felt fresh and different. Audiences connected not just with their songs, but with the idea of them, their chemistry, their contrast, their dynamic. They became more than performers, they became symbols of a certain kind of love. But while the public saw balance, the reality behind the scenes was more uneven. With success came more control. Decisions about their careers, their appearances, and their schedules increasingly came from one direction. At first, it didn't seem unusual. After all, Sonny had more experience in the industry. But over time, that guidance began to feel less like support and more like authority. And for someone who had already learned to adapt and depend, it was easy to slip into a role where questioning things didn't feel like an option. As the years passed, their fame expanded beyond music into television. Their show brought them into millions of homes every week. On screen, everything looked effortless. They joked, they laughed, they performed with confidence and ease. It was a carefully crafted image of happiness. But maintaining that image required constant work and constant performance, even off-stage. Behind that image, the pressure was building. Long filming hours, rehearsals, and live performances created an exhausting routine. There was little time to rest, and even less time to reflect. For Cher, the physical demands were only part of the challenge. The deeper struggle was emotional, the growing sense that her voice in her own life was becoming quieter. Control doesn't always appear suddenly. It often develops slowly in small changes that are easy to overlook at first. Over time, boundaries shift. Independence becomes limited. Decisions become one-sided. And eventually, what once felt like partnership can begin to feel like confinement. For Cher, that shift didn't happen overnight, but when she began to recognize it, it became impossible to ignore. Despite everything, leaving wasn't a simple choice. Their lives were deeply intertwined, not just personally, but professionally. Their careers depended on each other. Their public image was built as a unit. Walking away didn't just mean ending a relationship. It meant risking everything they had created together. And that kind of decision doesn't come easily, especially when the world is watching. By the early 1970s, the pace of their lives had become overwhelming. Performances, television tapings, and constant public appearances left little room to breathe. The schedule was relentless, and expectations continued to grow. From the outside, it looked like success at its peak, but internally, it was becoming unsustainable. There are moments in life when everything feels too heavy, but nothing seems changeable. Moments when the path you're on no longer feels right, yet stepping away feels impossible. For Cher, this period became one of those moments. The realization wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet but undeniable. Something had to change. Clarity often comes in unexpected ways. Sometimes it arrives not as a solution, but as a simple thought. There is another option. The idea of leaving didn't immediately bring relief. It brought uncertainty, fear, and the weight of consequences. But it also brought something new, the possibility of control over her own life. Even after that realization, the transition wasn't immediate. Publicly, everything continued as before. The performances went on. The image remained intact, but privately, things were shifting. The relationship was no longer what it had once been, even if the world couldn't see it yet. This period became one of the most complicated phases of her life. Living between two realities, one for the public and one behind closed doors, required constant emotional effort. It was a balancing act that couldn't last forever, but for a time, it continued because there was no clear way out. Eventually, the truth became unavoidable. The professional and personal ties that once held everything together began to unravel. What had once felt like a shared journey now felt like something she needed to step away from in order to move forward. And with that realization came the difficult process of separation. Freedom, when it finally comes, isn't always easy. It doesn't erase the past or simplify the future. For Cher, stepping away meant facing new challenges, financial uncertainty, career risks, and the task of redefining herself as an individual rather than part of a duo. Rebuilding a life and career independently takes resilience. It requires confidence that isn't always fully there yet. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and periods where the path forward wasn't clear. But there was also something else, a sense of ownership over her own choices that hadn't existed before. Over time, that independence began to shape a new chapter. She explored different creative directions, took risks, and proved that her identity extended far beyond the partnership that had once defined her. It wasn't an easy transformation, but it was a meaningful one. Looking back, stories like this are rarely as simple as they first appear. They're layered, shaped by time, perspective, and personal growth. What once seemed like a story about fame becomes something deeper, a story about understanding, boundaries, and the courage to change direction. In the end, the question isn't just why she left. It's how long it took to fully understand what staying meant. Because sometimes, the most important decisions in life aren't about success or failure. They're about choosing the path that allows you to remain yourself.